Journey Across Jean's Saga. Book 1. Now, Then, To Come. Part 3. To Come. Chapter 2. Old Tátos. The forest, full of new-growth oaks, cherries, and whatever else the birds have crapped out as they have flown overhead for the past 2 centuries, has taken over the once asphalted street that runs from the bunker and its surrounding ruins to Duna. The old university, once the center of map-making and other disciplines related to physical geography, still mostly stands intact, despite centuries of decaying facades and overgrowth that covers the entire complex of buildings. There are no clouds in the sky. Telehold, or the full moon, casts its moonbeams as far as the eye can see, illuminating the night sky as well as the ruins of a once vibrant city divided in two by a river once coursing to the brim with water, with life. In fact, it is so bright that it looks as if the old city is alight with electricity, but it can't be. Electricity is extinct, if such a thing is possible. At least it has gone out of use here among the peoples that inhabit this greater region. As the two get closer to the compound, Takver prepares herself emotionally. It's been several holds since she last visited the ruins. Around the time of harvest, just before third forage, she would take her candles and flowers to the compound, lighting the former as a way to guide the deceased back to the realm of the living. For centuries before the Great Dying, the local people would visit the cemeteries of their relatives who'd passed. It was time to clean the grave sites, light candles, and place fresh flowers. They had referred to this tradition as Halotak Napya, the Day of the Dead. Although Takver's people didn't consider themselves superstitious, Takver found that taking part in the anachronistic practice helped comfort her, because more than anything she'd missed her people, her family, so much. What she calls the compound is actually a network of buildings that surrounds the old underground station near the foot of Dunahed, or Duna Hill. The once subterranean transit hub was converted into a nighttime marketplace. Takver's people, her entire community, had run the market. Takver's immediate family members had operated the candle stall. They had been very skilled at the art of candle making, and they had traded their candles for food and clothing, mostly. Candles are a comfort, if not a necessity, among people who are nocturnal. Just across the bridge to the east of the river, the people of the old world constructed an enormous market hall that became a tourist hub. It's still intact today, but because of the Frid, Takver's people weren't allowed to cross the river only in the case of an emergency. So they did what they could and turned an old underground station into a market. Such irony. The stall to the right of Takver's family's stall traded in centuries-old odds and ends from the various landfills that existed on the outskirts of the old city. Digging through ancient refuse was a dirty and dangerous job, yet much of what the contemporary peoples use for their daily lives has been reused or repurposed from the old world. Some things were inevitably scavenged from old dwellings as well. Hundreds years earlier, almost overnight, the human population of Earth drastically reduced in size. Centuries later, most quotidian items found in a typical household still persevered, despite the houses themselves having become mostly ruins. The once crowded city was a gold mine of ancient artifacts up for grabs to the willing gleaner. People came from all up and down the Duna to the great sunken marketplace. Its formation was one of the reasons that the literalists broke off from the Atmanedi. The latter believed that trade should only be done with other Atmanedi communes, The former disagreed. They wanted the freedom to intermingle in exchange with non-Atmaneti. Eventually, a portion of people from the various Atmaneti communes split off and formed this new community. It had survived for almost half a century before it was decimated. Takver was the only survivor. She thought everyone was dead because her telepathic connection with them was severed abruptly that day she sought refuge in the bunker. This is the closest I've ever been to this mountain, Bedap sends to Takver, who has suddenly stopped and is looking off into the distance. To the right, the moonlight dances its waltz on the duna. If there were anything more beautiful, Takver shares a half-thought. For most of my life, I'd come here, right here to this spot, and just stare out into the world. But that puts an arm around her shoulders, squeezing her a bit. It's an emotional moment for them, too, but for different reasons. Most of their life, they had been forbidden from venturing too far from camp. The distant hills and the river at their feet had become an imagined border wall from a very young age. The youngin' who crossed the old river was told to every Atmaneti child at bedtime when the morning light began to shine high in the sky. "What are they going to do to him, Egg?" Bedap can remember asking their egg blood after he recounted for the first time. At least, it was the first time that little Mock remembered the details of the story. That story had been told morning after morning since they was still inside his womb. How little Heggie got kidnapped after crossing Old River out of curiosity during water fetching. Well, only Ishten knows. Little Heggie never came back, Malna had explained. When Bedap was still Mock and had fewer reawakenings to count for, and their people had their settlement closer to the old long road, so that the two faraway hills could be seen from inside the encampment, the hills were a constant reminder of the isolation they had always felt, but hadn't always understood why it hurt. Now, standing only hundreds of paces from the hills and the bridge, Bedap breathes in deeply. Freedom fills their lungs with the cool night air. "Can we go down?" Bedap points to the openings in the ground that leads to the old tunnels. It's still very exciting for them to go into places whose entrance had been forbidden their entire life as a youngin'. After spending time in the bunker and exploring ruins with Takver, entering the ruins of the old world had mostly ceased to frighten them. Still, the thought of going down into that darkness raised the hairs on the back of their neck and arms. Yes, but first things first. She takes 3 candlesticks from her nettle satchel. She gives one to Bedap and then places one at the foot of a figure of a person with a long coat holding a guitar. It must be made of some sort of metal because it looks like a relic of the old world, and it was still intact. Takver bends down and lights the candle using her fire starter box. Around the wide plinth, there are several adornments, dried up flowers, puddles of colorful wax that must have been melted by the scorching sun. "Who is this supposed to be, Tak?" Bedap shares, along with the feeling of confusion which Takver senses as a mix of yellow and orange hues, as well as an itch at the base of her head where it meets the nape of her neck. "I have no scorching idea," she smiles. "No one really does. Palad and I would mess around and pretend they was our sperm blood. Since we never got to meet him, we always just played like the statue was him." Silence. "Now that everyone is gone," Takver continues, "I've been coming here and leaving flowers, candles, and other offerings. I did it mostly for Palat, but eventually I did it for everyone else too, once I gave up hope." "I think it's frickin' awesome." Bedap knocks their knuckles on the statue's long, parted metallic hair, making a deep, dull, clanking sound. Bedap bends down and lights their candle from the one at the foot of the statue. Then they turns around and picks up their pace to catch up to Takver, who is already standing at the edge of the pitch-black entrance. How is it that your people and my people are so different? Bedap asks, mostly rhetorically, as the two begin their descent down the cement stairs to the old underground space. With this being the third reawakening since the whole market was pillaged, there has been no one to keep up with the maintenance of the area. Beautiful dandelions, crawling ground cover of all sorts, as well as other greenery, has taken over the once kempt entrance to the market. Who knows? Takver responds after a few moments. I guess they were different enough to split up. Yeah, Bedap considers. But how did it start? We didn't talk about it at all. I think the older people in our community preferred we just forget about it. Well, I think it has to do with the fact that the old literalists felt a divide, a fault line of sorts, that couldn't be mended. I mean, Takver pauses for a moment to collect her thoughts. Meanwhile, as they reach the end of the decline, she holds out her candle as if to extend its light further in front of them. Oh! Takver darts a few steps toward what looks like an old food court, and then suddenly stops. She sends hues of purple and blue to Bedap unintentionally, but also without much bridle. The nostalgia is overwhelming. Oh, Sib, can you smell the langosh? Takver turns and looks at her sibling, her lips stretching from ear to ear. I used to help Lila Nanny knead the dough every evening before the market opened up. Now, she's looking off into the distance as if she were remembering something far away. People would line up all the way around that corner. She pointed the candle deep into the black ether, deep into the tunnels. The wild thing was that she only ever accepted different flowers and potatoes as payment. I got my free one because I helped out, but I can imagine some kids had to learn how to forage potatoes to get theirs. Oh, how I miss her langosh. Bedap is acutely aware that they is hungry. Instantly, their body language changes, slumping their shoulders and letting their head drop forward. You might as well be feeding me to the vodkutya with all this talk about food. You're killing me, Tak. Can we change the topic? I hate to ruin your beautiful memory, but anything but langosh, Tak. Bedap takes their candle and walks to the opposite side of the old station, holding it close to the wall. It's cold to the touch and there's no give. Directly ahead, deep down into the chasm, there are 4 rows of steel stairs. Once upon a time, the stairs had been mechanical and carried pedestrians from top to bottom or vice versa, without the necessity of climbing. Takver had grown up in those tunnels, playing on those stairs. This had been her backyard. There were so many memories here. Sib, I need to go down to the very bottom. Bedap started, suddenly hearing their own voice in their head. It's a long climb down and an even longer climb back up if you want to join me. Okay, Bedap replies, but promise that you'll tell me more about your people to help me understand why they decided to split off. On the grates of the stairs, each footstep they take sends a tapping echo 30 meters down the tunnel. Once Bedap becomes aware of the acoustics, they starts making crow noises, and soon squawks are overheard over the taps. Takver holds the candle up to her face and gives Bedap a glaring scowl. Oops, they shrugs, and then says even louder, Sorry. Sorry can now be heard bouncing off the sleek surface of the ceiling and walls as the duo slowly makes their descent. Bedap shrugs again and gives Takver a coy smirk. Now, this time in a whisper, Bedap inquires to Takver, What makes our people so different? You really know nothing about my people? Takver mind replies, without looking at her sibling. Really? No. The only thing I know is that we're not supposed to go on your side of the river. Bedap uses their one free hand to make air quotes as they emphasizes your. The other hand is still holding the ever diminutive shrinking candlestick with the ring at the base that catches the dripping wax. Takver pauses for a moment and then begins to recount the history. Well, stories have it that long ago there was an ideological division. For over a century and a half after the Great Dying, the various groups that built their habitats close to the old river coexisted peacefully. There were occasional raids, but nothing systematic like had happened to Takver and Bedap's respective communities. As for the Atmaneti, disagreements within communes and between disparate communes were resolved in the traditional way through a peace circle. Most of the larger collective disagreements that existed fell into 4 different categories. In no particular order of importance, there were those that advocated for the cessation of the nomadic way of life, those who wanted to open up trade with non-Atmaneti communities, those who sought to abolish the superstitions, which some saw as the root cause of all the disagreements, and those who interpreted the books very literally. For Takver's people, the ones who eventually would decide to split from several different Atmaneti communes, the books were sacred. Nowhere in any of the 3 books was there a person that wasn't gendered according to a binary. There were men and women, and boys and girls. The fact that the Atmaneti disregarded this historical fact was seen as blasphemous. "These are fictional accounts," one of the older members yells. "They are allegorical. For Ishtan's sake, the anarchists lived on a moon in a distant solar system. Are you telling us that moon was real too?" "No, Tesht," responds one of the literalists. That's what the secessionists called themselves. They thought the 3 books were best interpreted literally. Pulling at their dark beard as they tend to do when they get agitated, regardless of the fictional worlds, you can't deny the gender binary and the obvious hierarchy that existed among the proprietarians who inhabited the moon's moon. There must be a reason that she included those people in her book. As a way of juxtaposing the non-hierarchical ways of the anarchists, another person adds heatedly. It's just that nowhere, and I emphasize nowhere, in the books is there a person who isn't either a man or a woman. Lauren disguises herself as a man, but only to make herself less vulnerable. The spokesperson continues. "We need to abolish these antiquated ways of naming our children after berries and salad greens. Our children are born either boys or girls based on their genitalia. That's how it should be." There's muttering rippling across the Peace Council house like waves in a pond. Several people shout out in agreement and in disagreement. Those who are silent are no doubt sharing their own opinions with their genetic kin. "Ishtanem, next you're going to tell us that we are born with a gender?" exclaims the same older member. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying." Gasps ring throughout the tent. A younger story weaver who had not too long before this momentous reunion returned from water fetching stands up. "This is a dangerous path you are taking us down, Tesht." Dolores' face is red with anger and frustration. "Have we learned nothing from the stories passed down to us from the last ones? Have we learned nothing at all? Are you suggesting that we have another gender cleansing? Are you going to be the one who cuts off my partner's balls for not conforming to the binary?" She spits on the ground in front of her. "Ishtan, help us." "Wait," Bedap interrupts, grabbing Takver by the arm of her tunic frock with their free hand. "Do you believe in this gender binary that your people were so passionate about?" The siblings finally reach the lowest level of the underground complex. They both note, silently, that their nipples have grown rigid from the decrease in temperature. There's also a slight breeze. To either side of the intricately tiled mosaic platform, a system of 7 or 8 connected hover wagons with their doors jammed open rests in a long line that fills each tunnel. Centuries before, commuters would form staggered lines along the tunnel corridors, awaiting the next host of wagons to take them to their job, a concert, or some other destination. But now, these wagons have been turned into commercial stalls. Takver and Bedap enter the wagon closest to them on the left. The wagons must have been emptied of their seating because there are no vestiges of benches or individual seats that passengers from before the Great Dying would have fought over to rest their weary bodies after a long day of work. Instead, there were rows and rows of stall after stall. Most of the stalls were still filled with goods meant for trading, but everything was strewn about, of course. Anything of use that could be scavenged from a landfill or a dwelling in ruins. Bedap scans their surroundings. A tin watering canna and other gardening implements, a blue tarpaulin, an entire stall of charred blankets and other wovens. The sudden appearance of the marauders 3 reawakenings ago would have caused quite a commotion, not to mention the fires that were set to smoke the unexpected merchants out of their subterranean emporium. Takver is standing in the middle of this aisle looking down the long corridor of the train. This is the first time she'd been down at the market since she'd had to escape those many moons ago. She hadn't dared venture deep into the cement ravine alone, but now that Bedap was with her, she thought it more safe. Even to her own surprise, she doesn't shed a tear. Bedap looks over at their sister, holding the candle in her direction. "Are you okay, Tak?" After a moment of collecting her thoughts, Takver responds. "Our stall was down this way. I hope what I'm looking for is still here." She pauses before taking off again in the direction of her family's old stall, stepping over the piles of wares strewed about. "And no, to answer your question, I don't believe in the binary. I think a lot of people in my community were fanatics. Fortunately, the mother wasn't one of them." Bedap has a confused look on their face, but because of the dark, Takver doesn't see. However, she hears it in their voice. "You hope what's still there?" "Payment." They reach her family's stall. Makeshift walls of woven plant fiber have been erected, enclosing a rectangular space about the size of a typical sleeping room for 2 or 3 youngins in one of the dwellings back at Bedap's commune. At the back of the stall, a plexiglass window encases the mosaic tunnel wall a few meters away. A scorched signboard that reads "Fakyak" torches dangles from the gray plastic strap handles that commuters of old once clung onto in times of turbulence along their route. There is dried, melted wax everywhere, in many different colors that can't truly be appreciated because of the lack of sufficient light. Takver squats down and places her dwindled dierta candle under a wooden table, wax stalactites dripping along the edges of its surface. With some flat object she finds on the floor, she pries a panel of sorts up from its secured position, recessed in the floor of the wagon. She pulls out a round box. It might be a tin box, like the kind Christmas cookies used to come in back when spar was ubiquitous in most neighborhoods, even in the suburbs. Bedap is kneeling down with candle in hand, watching from behind and imagining a much younger, smaller Takver hiding something precious, while the market bustles on just meters away from her. With her back to her sibling, she opens the lid with a pop. She examines its contents, snaps the lid shut, and puts the tin box in her satchel. As she goes to back out from under the table, something cracks off in the distance, back toward where they'd entered the train car. Then, a heavy object thuds to the floor, its contents spilling out, creating even more clanks and clunks. Almost reflexively, the two hold their candles out in the direction from where the noises came. "What was that, Tak?" Bedap blurts out, trembling a bit. Just as Bedap finishes their question, They both see a cat-like tail standing straight up into the air, walking back toward whence they all came. Bedap grabs Takver's free hand, offering to help pull her up. I've seen that tail before. Let's go, Sib. We need to follow it. I have the sensation that they're trying to get our attention. Takver is on her feet, and they are both off, quickening their pace to the opened doors. What do you mean you've seen them before? Bedap is slightly out of breath. The sudden adrenaline rush has left them wanting fuller lungs. It's got to be the same cat. I never see cats around, especially at the bunker. And on the rare occasion I do see them, they're never alone. This cat was watching us when you did the impossible and pulled a disc from the base of a mushroom. I saw them scuttle off just as I was climbing back down into the bunker and closing the hatch. Takver remembers feeling like she and her sibling were being watched, and just thinking about it had the hairs on her arms standing upright. As they turn left out of the wagon, they spot the cat sitting at the entrance to the steps, seemingly waiting for them. Bedap squats as if they're going to kneel down on one knee and reaches out their free hand. Here, Titsa. They makes a smooching sound, beckoning the cat. It's all right, little Titsa. Don't be afraid. Takver cocks her head and shoots a glare out of the corner of her eye at her sibling. Where have I heard that before? Bedap shrugs off her attempt at a playful attack and then scooches closer to the cat. The creature is spectacular to look at. It isn't too often that cats let humans see them, not to mention let them come close. From what they can see, given the dimness of their surroundings, the contemporary progeny of the old domesticated cat is usually a bit smaller than the one sitting just ahead of them. This one has big, almond-shaped yellow eyes that almost glow from the shadowy light that their candles cast onto it from a few meters away. They's beautiful, Tak. Bedap starts to move close. And as they does, the cat hops up onto the stairs and starts climbing. The two follow the cat. When they get to the stairs, Takver looks up into the darkness. Despite not being able to see up to the top, she remembers being amazed at how little she felt all those years descending and ascending these steps. There must be over 200 of them to climb to get to the top. Oh, wow. Bedap stares up into the abyss. We climbed down all those? Takver tugs at Bedap's satyr satchel. Come on. I don't want to lose the cat. When they finally get to the top, 10 minutes or more must have passed. Bedap is leaning over with their hands on their knees trying to catch their breath. Why the scorching knob did your people choose this place for their piazza market? My people had a belief that if you're not suffering, you're doing something wrong. It's obvious that Takver had thought of this question herself at one time. That was something that I never quite understood about us. Everything seemed to have to be so painstaking. She pauses. Don't get me wrong. We had a lot of playtime, too. Many of the people were very light-hearted. We loved to joke around. Where there was work, there was always play. My memories of this place are nothing but good. One of the unexpected advantages of merging was that Takver was able to say all of that with her thoughts, without pausing to catch her breath. She is panting, after all, just as much as Bedap. Up above in the opening of the concrete crevice that was once one of the many mouths of the Metro Line 4, the moonlight casts its beam down on the cat, creating a backlit silhouette with a bright white aura around them, like a furry, long-tailed Mexican Our Lady of Guadalupe. The gray with black dots and stripes, Tabby, is waiting for them, yet again. It's not obvious whether they are panting like Takver and Bedap, having ascended much faster than the pair of siblings. The whiskered murder mittens must be used to climbing. They is a cat after all, and cats like to be up high, whether perched on a tree branch or atop an old ruin of a house or building. These elusive feline quadrupeds have always been the loft overwatchers of the old city, staring down at civilizations from their balconies and windows. At a time of celebrated post-human dominance, why would now be any different? Once the two make eye contact with the cat, the latter takes off running. Takver and Bedap have to run up the stairs so as to not lose sight of their new acquaintance. As they get to the top of the precipice, they see Kitty resting on an old electrical transformer box, now reddish-brown from rust, but once the color of lichen, pale patina. Again, the cat scurries away, beckoning the two to maintain their pursuit. Where in the scorching earth is they leading us to? Bedap asks rhetorically, not expecting an answer. Knowing that it's just Bedap's way of thinking aloud, Takver ignores them. Instead, she picks up her pace, breaking into a slow jog. Her satchel rattles as the forces cause the contents to clash with the tin container. Moments later, they are at the mouth of the bridge. Bedap can't believe their eyes. This is the closest they's ever been to this iconic landmark. Its deck, from end to end, is covered with vehiculars of all sizes that have become part of the bridge itself after centuries of being parked in the same spot. The green of the crawling vines blends in with the patina of the steel trusses, having taken over as the new surface of the automobiles and the bridge itself. High above, resting on top of the four latticed towers, the moon backlights the falcon-like turtle birds that have watched over the duna since the suspended nexus was first constructed half a millennia before. From a few meters away, the cat is staring down at them from the roof of an old yellow and white hover tram that no longer floats over the maglev strip that lines the old city on almost every main street. Meow. The tabby meows just before it leaps onto the deck and takes off down the trail that, over the years, has been trampled and made unmistakably into a path. Besides the rusted and ramshackle vehiculars, air cars, hover trams, and a hover bus flipped onto its side, the trail is littered with all sorts of detritus as well as inorganic material. Bedap steps over a broken guitar that has been stripped of its strings and whose slivers jet out in all directions. Guitar strings make good snares for people that hunt animals for their meat and hides, as well as other parts. Bones can be turned into useful tools, and they make a good broth for those who have taste for such things. Why do your 16s choose this place to celebrate? Bedap breaks the silence. At this point, they're already at the other end of the bridge. The cat is nowhere to be seen. Quiet, Sib. We should be mind speaking. We have no idea who is lurking around here. Takver sends a hue of red, her typical warning color that she emits telepathically when she gets anxious. And I don't know why here. I mean, it's a pretty cool place. Takver crouches down, seeing something shiny on the edge of the path. She picks it up, stands up, and holds the coin close to her face to get a better look. Its number reads 200. Wow, Sib. Takver turns around and holds her arm outstretched in Bedap's direction. Look at this. I can't believe it. Bedap catches up and meets Takver's hand with their arm outstretched as well. They takes the coin from her hand and examines it up close, squinting a bit to get a clearer focus. I used to collect these when I'd go out scavenging with my egg blood. The blacksmith in the commune next door would give us a whole pumpkin for a basket full of these old relics. Bedap tosses it up into the air. Heads or tails? Takver looks playfully at Bedap, then Bedap interjects before she can choose. Heads. You tell me what's in the tin box. And what do I get if it's tails? Before Bedap can reply, a large explosion goes off, shaking the bridge and causing the two to duck instinctively. The sudden pressure makes them dizzy, their ears ringing to the point of nausea. After a few moments, the last of the debris rains onto the bridge's entrance, splashing down into the stream below like someone dumping a construction crane's claw full of rocks into a pond. The immediate area is instantly shrouded in a cloud of dust that doesn't quite reach the siblings, who are still hunkering down. As the shock wears off, Takver is able to focus her thoughts. What in the... Sib, are you okay? We need to get off this bridge now. She doesn't wait for Bedap to respond and just grabs their hand and starts pulling. Bedap doesn't hesitate and lets her pull them several meters to the other side of the old river. We need to hide quickly, Takver says, as she is looking all around for some sort of cover. Look, Bedap points to what looks like a complex of old ruins covered in creepy vines and other foliage. The dew on all the various leaves glitter in the moonlight. Come on, this way. Now, Bedap takes Takver by the hand and leads her to a building that is still half standing on a corner, three-dimensional words dangling off the facade. Some letters are missing. B space RGE space ING. A thicket of trees near its entrance creates a privacy barrier from the semi-openness of the old square. Centuries before, this was a very busy area of the city because of the famous Piats market, where tourists could buy their souvenir bag of paprika. One of the universities was located here as well, thus the square had offered a variety of options for the thirsty students to quench their study-induced drought with a cold beer on tap. As the two do a preliminary scan of the hideout, Takver interrupts the mind silence. Sib, if we would have... She takes a deep breath and lets her mind relax a bit, her thoughts running like a speeding train. Just a few more moments down there and the sheer terror of what has just occurred is overtaking her. Her hands are trembling like a hypoglycemic having an episode from low blood sugar. Bedap grabs her shaking hand and steadies it. But we're okay, Tak. Bedap is still in shock, adrenaline still flowing through their body. It hasn't hit them yet. If it hadn't been for the cat getting their attention, they'd probably still be down in the market that is now, undoubtedly, a mere crater filled with chunks of broken cement and other rubble. If it wasn't for that feral cat, Bedap begins sending their thoughts before the two are startled by the sudden appearance of something or someone in the entrance to the thicket. Bedap grabs Takver's arm and squeezes it. Both siblings are sending red hues to each other, and as they both scurry to their feet, ready to fight if they have to, the fluffy tabby comes into view. Mew, mew, meow! Their Sitsa savior yowls at them, fluttering their puffed-out tail like they's about to spray. But instead, they jumps up into the air about a meter off the ground and karate kicks off the wall of the building and dashes in the direction that the two were planning on heading anyway, before they were almost blown to pieces. The two siblings just look at each other, their mouths slightly agape, in awe of the coincidence that they both just witnessed. They have no doubt now who is orchestrating their journey. This realization is both unspoken and unmind-spoken, so much so that there is no need to consider the next steps. They both look down, making sure they have their satchels, and take off in the direction in which the tabby went. After about 40 minutes of following the quick-pawed tabby cat through the winding streets of the old city, the two siblings stop just before the entrance of an old university campus park turned forest. The full moon shines through the sparse leaves of the ash trees, casting their shadows onto the path before them. As they round the corner, the cat disappears into the entrance, flanked by crumbling stucco walls that are overgrown with wisteria, its woody, twining vines enveloping the parapet, and its flowers giving off a perfume so sweet that Bedap is compelled to stop and breathe in its aromatic splendor. Come on, Sib. We're going to lose them again. Takver pulls at Bedap's cloak as she takes the turn around the corner into the barrier-free but obviously formerly gated entrance. No sooner had the cat disappeared than a hooded crow seemingly appeared in its place. Hooded crows look a lot like black crows, with the main difference being that The back from their neck down to the base of their tail tends to be silvery gray, as well as their lower torso. In the right moonlight, their obsidian feathers shine blue-black. The interesting thing is that these corvids are diurnal, active during the day, and this one should be nesting with the rest of its roost high up in some towering trees somewhere. Takver stops in her tracks, causing Bedap to bump into her from behind. The bird is twitching and at the same time staring up at them from the duff-covered ground that was once paved with gray bricks, like the kind that is used in patios and driveways. The crow's gray beak opens in a shrieking squawk as the two siblings stand there just staring, jaws dropped in disbelief. With a twist of the body, the corvinus's feathers ruffle in a frenzy of gyrations. Bedap swears they catches a glimpse of fur, awkwardly morphing into feathers, azure obsidian wings and bib, raven eyes that reach deep into mind, stealing thoughts. Then, with a vibrato flap of wings, the feathered creature takes off into the air, flying into the direction of a small pond off into the distance. The siblings shake off their ephemeral stupor and are off once again, picking up the pace so as to not lose track of the bird that is now swooping down on the other side of the pond. Takver takes note of the park-like area surrounding the pond and how it looks maintained, as if a whole community lived there. But there are no signs of dwellings or other structures to suggest that the park is inhabited. As they pass the pond on its northwestern edge, Bedap points as the bird makes a sudden descent into the wooded thicket just beyond the water. "Over there! It looks like another path," Bedap pants, signaling directly ahead in the opening of the dense growth of trees, chestnuts, and ashes. As they enter the path, up ahead there is a gate of sorts, like the ones on the fences around the houses from the old world. In fact, the entire fenced-in area looks like it came from 200 years ago. A small, square, yellow, stucco-walled house with a clipped gable roof, typical of this region of the world for centuries. And like the houses of old, this one looks like the roof is about to cave in. From afar, the siblings can see a figure at the gate. It doesn't move. As they get closer, they can make out a person. They is wearing a patchwork cloak. Its hood rests just above the shoulders. The first thing that stands out to Bedap is that this person has pale, pinkish peach skin like them. If their hair were down, it would hang low to the top of their buttocks, and ash blonde with strands here and there of grays and whites. They keeps their braided locks up in a bun like Bedap does. In fact, this person could be an older Bedap, if only Bedap had a short, dark brown beard with hints of red in the right light, puffy bags that rest beneath each of the two saggy-lidded, almond-shaped eyes. "It's about time you two got here," Old Tátos exclaims, extending their arms and wearing a toothy grin that stretches from pointy ear to pointy ear. Come in. You two must be exhausted." Takver scowls, lowers her gaze, turning to her sibling and mind whispers. "Did she just imply that she's been expecting us?" "Oh, no need to keep secrets around here, little one," Old Tátos chuckles. "We're already in your thoughts," they mind speak to both of them. Then, switching back to an audible voice, "But don't worry, we won't intrude too much without your permission." Bedap is quite taken aback. This is only the second person that they has ever shared with. "I know you have lots of questions, but do come in. We all can rest soon. You two sure wore me out. Could anyone possibly walk any slower than you two?" Old Tátos chuckles, holding the gate open and beckoning the two siblings to enter with an arm stretched out in the direction of the dilapidated hovel. Come. "How did you know?" Bedap begins to ask. "Oh, don't you worry your mind about that." Old Tátos is still grinning. "Let's just say we know a lot of things." Old Tátos is looking at Takver, who isn't following behind Bedap, as they crossed the threshold of the gate. "Now, don't you worry either. Those nasty things they say about us are mostly untrue," Old Tátos winks as they enters Takver's mind. "If we betray you in any way, you can keep that little trinket that you brought in the tin box." Takver's mouth drops open for a second. She realizes this and quickly straightens up and starts catching up to Bedap. Her eyes are still squinted, but most of the cold shoulder that she's been giving to Old Tátos has begun to thaw. As Old Tátos closes the gate, they brush off a patch of silvery gray and blue-black feathers from the sleeve of their frock, making an oopsie face and giggling to themselves. "Oh, silly us! Let us get that door for you." With a snap of their fingers, the door to the ruin of a dwelling opens. Takver and Bedap look at each other in awe. Bedap grabs Takver's cloak, almost pleadingly, as if saying, "If I'm staying, you're staying." Then, in the next moment, the three of them disappear into the dimly lit ramshackle abode. Off in the distance, an owl's wings silently flap as it swoops down just above the pond, talons dragging, sending ripples that cause the moonlight to dance its fluid chardash folk dance across the murky surface. Thanks for listening to another episode of Fenn Thornbot Reads. If you want a notification for the next episode, don't forget to hit subscribe. If you liked what you listened to today, hit the like button. And if you think somebody else might like it, hit the share button. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next time. You can interact with the book online at fennthornbot.fan or just scan the QR code above. And may hold guide you as naught makes itself scarce.